Welcome to episode 69 of the Bladeology podcast. We are back again. First of all, I'd like to thank our new and amazing sponsors, the New Jersey Steel Baron. Don't forget, if you're looking for some pretty amazing special Hitachi steel featuring the Aogami blue and the Shirogami white steel, it's available stateside for one of the first times ever from our friends down in Jersey. So go hit them up, send them an email, shoot them a call, tell them the guys at the podcast sent you. It's NewJerseySteelBaron.com. Let's jump into it like we do every week. Is it week? Welcome to the Bladeology podcast. This is your host, Jeremiah Burbank. I'm here with my
Nick Chuprin of NCC Knives.
And Chuck, are you here?
Chuck Gudritis of Gudritis Knives.
All right. We have three people at a table doing a podcast in person, as we are trying to do more regularly now. Nick and I just got back from the USN gathering in Las Vegas, Nevada. It was quite the experience. We had all kinds of weather occurrences, and we're going to go over it. We're going to do a show recap. So we did the gathering. We left New Hampshire on Wednesday. We were there pretty early. I had some business to attend to in Los Angeles. Nick stayed in Vegas for a day, and we reconvened on Thursday, where we meet our heroes at the Planet Hollywood Casino. Nick?
Met my hero, Chris Angel.
Yeah, he's right. You went and saw the Chris Angel show.
After all these years of seeing that show outside of our gallery room, I finally saw it. It's actually pretty good.
Was it?
Yeah, I think David Copperfield last time, the Chris Angel this time. It was pretty good. It was weird to see him because I haven't actually seen what he looks like these days. He's obviously older, but all the advertising is still from 20 years ago.
He's young in ads, but a little older in real life.
Yeah, but that was a good show.
Nice. Where? Just out of curiosity, where were your tickets? Up front, in the back, on the floor?
Like middle.
Oh, okay. That's not bad.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Okay. All right. Chris Angel, young forever in giant advertisements all over the elevators in Planet Hollywood. Yeah, so USN. Let's dive right into it. So this year was a special year. Last year was a very different show. Won't get too much into that because you've already heard our show recap from last year and our references to it in the past. It certainly has changed from a regular custom knife show into more of a product of the EDC environment, which is not necessarily a bad thing. We see these trends come and go. We see single finger, double finger knucks. We see spinners. We see all kinds of stuff that is born out of our industry. It's a product of our environment, and it's not necessarily bad, but it's certainly a trend. So I think this year was the personification of last year. We're seeing a lot of patch guys. We're seeing a lot of sticker guys. We're seeing a lot of these things that aren't necessarily knives, but they're knife adjacent. You know, it's a response to patch culture, like Ranger Eyes, that are certainly born out of the EDC and knife community. And stickers. Stickers are a hugely popular thing. I do stickers for PBK. But this year was definitely even more of that. And less of a custom knife show. So the show is evolving in different directions. I personally had a couple conversations with people at the show who basically said the same thing that Nick had said previously, which is I talked to Jeff Vandermolen, and he was like, it's an interesting show. He's like, a lot of the people I'm meeting are new people. Like I've never, and not in a good way necessarily.
Yeah, I didn't recognize anybody outside of the industry. Like, there are professional showgoers, as I say. Like, this isn't their place of business. They're just really into it, and they do as many shows as I do. I consider me doing a lot of shows, and you see them all the time. They weren't even there. It was all just new clients. I met two guys that had my knife in their pocket. Never met them before. But besides that, just not even. I didn't see the normal repeat offenders or new people or whatever. It was a completely different crowd.
I definitely think, and now I certainly would not want to give the connotation of new people being a negative thing, because it's definitely not. I would say new people as in new, unfamiliar knife individuals, people who weren't right. We met a bunch of people who didn't have knives at all, either owned them or weren't carrying them. Again, not terrible, but you were at a knife show, and it's like the USN is a very insular knife show, so to have people like I think that's strange. Like, you don't own a knife at all, or you're not a knife person, and they were attending for various other reasons, whatever, it's fine.
Yeah, speaking of knives, there's one guy I spoke to for over an hour. He didn't really collect any knives at all. He was part of that like pocket coin. I mean, like worry coin. And what he explained to me as a tactile experience for a lot of the JRW stuff because I didn't get it, so I got to talk to him for a while. Then I started to understand some of it after speaking to him, but he was purely there for that kind of stuff. He wasn't a knife collector. He didn't have a knife on him. He was a big fan of JRW and the one other guy. The name escapes me at the moment.
Starco?
Not Starco. He was at the show. John bought some stuff from him too.
JRW. Ooh. I don't know.
It's the first time I saw the guy's stuff. So that's or stuff like Starco. They were talking about Starco's work too, but like every time I meet guys that are into that stuff, they're into knives too. It's the first time I really spoke to someone who wasn't part of the knife scene, but was part of just that scene. So that explains more of the show, what was happening there. Was exactly knife people. Like I said, it's not a bad thing. They all commingle.
Exactly. It's born out of everything that we do, like knucks, knives, spinners, whatever. It's all kind of, you can make an argument that's all EDC stuff, and you could definitely make a really good argument that maybe having these sort of exterior groups bring, the product brings them into the knife community, right? And then they all of a sudden are introduced to knives, like, oh my God, this is great. So that's definitely something. I just think usually it's the knives that bring people in, and then they're EDC guys. Like I know that's sort of, where a lot of people were like, oh yeah, knives are cool. Oh, and knives come with these little patches, or the knife maker's making something other than knives. So that was definitely different. I would say the same thing. Like obviously, like I recognize some dealers I know, and I recognize some collectors I know, but not a lot of those regular customers that I know from other USNs. Like it was just sort of, it was very different, and I'm absolutely just gonna have to say, Friday morning by 11 or 12, it was pretty. It looked like, if you're familiar with the show, it looked like a late afternoon on Saturday already by Friday. So definitely Friday was I think it was a relatively strong open. There were definitely some people rushing in, but a very indicative thing of that. Everybody can get to this. The Microtech table. The Microtech table had a huge rush, but it was a lot less people, and there was no line in front of the Microtech people by maybe an hour after show open, I think. Like it was pretty, they were done with, maybe less than that. And that's usually a pretty crowded area. They have these famous show specials, same thing with ProTech. But those are some of the biggest booths there, and they had less of a line. And again, not trying to start a bank rush, just reporting facts on this one. And as the day went on, it got slower quicker. But then I think by the time Saturday came around, Saturday actually seemed pretty busy in the morning. I would say from morning till about 2 o'clock ish, the show was definitely more busy than it was all day on Friday, which is nice. See, Saturdays, a lot of people are off work. They're coming in and they're experiencing the show. So that's definitely, I think that's part of it. It is definitely the overall attendance this year was lackluster compared to other years. Would you say so, Nick?
Yeah, one, like I said, it was very different collector base. It was also very different exhibitor base. And not what I'm talking about, not knives, even knife making related. I've been going to the show for 8 years now. It was always kind of the same revolving makers, and a lot of us did talk about this at the show. It just hasn't been the same since the Vegas shooting. A lot of guys dropped out versus with just how policies were in Vegas, and a lot of these hotels have changed, which is honestly acceptable based on the circumstances. But I remember there was a constant wait list. I think I waited like 4 years before I got a chance to exhibit there. And even I think post-pandemic in 21 was the similar thing, if not 2019. But besides the point, like now just people at the show are at least first-time exhibitors at the show. That, like I said, like usually it's a pretty hard chance to get a table there, but a lot of people there I didn't recognize or were just brand new to making or was their first show exhibiting. Some stuff that didn't even make sense to be there, like there's people selling massage guns, which is something you would see at Blade show, which made sense there, but I'm just curious how people in the massage gun industry would find a very niche knife show that hasn't like only advertised on its forum. But That's what. Also, even the collectors. John made a good point Saturday. I didn't know. I didn't notice until he said it. Almost no one flew in this time for the show. Mostly every collector or attendee just drove in from the surrounding states. So it didn't draw the full domestic or international crowd like it usually does. Who knows for what factors? But yeah, most of the people were locals to. I don't know. Here we call it the tri-state area, whatever they say on the West Coast for the nearby states.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. And you know, at a point, we're seeing a lot of these smaller shows pop up, and the smaller shows seem to be even more targeted towards a local environment. So perhaps the show will evolve into a hyper-local show. Downsizing is not always failing. Sometimes contracting is actually expanding in other directions. So there's definitely a possibility. I had forgotten about that. I know two of the makers who I was excited to see, which were Auxiliary Manufacturing. I carry his fixed blades on the website. He's a cool dude. Not necessarily a new maker, but new-ish to the show circuit. He was there. He was excited. I mean, he was excited. USN, right? And he definitely expressed that he's having a good show. I'm not going to speak out of turn for him, but he definitely pulled me aside and was like, "Is this normal? Is this sort of like, what am I looking at here? Is a scale 1 to 10? Is this sort of standard? Just because he's a one-man operation." He did have his wife there with him, but he, like he said, I have to choose my shows wisely. And in that case, if it's like this normally, and he is, as you said, he's in Reno, so he's not that far away. I mean, for us, that's might as well be next door. So he was like, if this is like this always, like I don't know, like I'd have to think about it. And he still had he had a pretty good show. His Saturday ended up sort of covering the cost of his show, and I was happy to pick some pieces up from him. And then our friend locally, Colin, from Mag10 Knife Works, he had traveled out. We see Colin all the time at NCCA. Chuck, you texted me like, "Hey, Colin's gonna be there," and I was like, "Oh my god!" Like, so we see him all the time. He lives in Rhode Island, and this was his first USN.
It's also his second not industry show, aside from Blade show.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But it's the aura behind the show. Is I guess both of those guys share that. One is doing shows a little more regularly, and Colin has this second show. But they both had this sort of mental image of like USN, like that's the cool Vegas show. It's the GOAT.
Preconceived notion.
Yeah.
Of the energy that the show should have,
right,
based on previous years.
Yeah.
And from what I've heard, it just didn't have that energy.
It was a bit lackluster, it was, and for guys like that, it's a struggle because they're one-man shows. So it's a small business. You have to pay for. I mean, we all do, but especially when you're in that case, like it counts. Traveling cross country, you get your hotel, your food, your obviously the table. So interesting to see what direction that is. And where USN is going to be in a couple of years. I know at the end of the show, Larry seemed to be, who was the showrunner, I would call him, show owner, showrunner, seemed to be exhilarated to express that, we survived one more year. And I think the rumor is they're definitely going to try for year 2, which would be great. 15 years, I think that would be a very cool sort of USN, feather in the cap, 15-year knife show. So, I mean, again, fingers crossed for year 2. That might be really cool. Just eerie to see a show like that because of the gravitas of USN that it used to have, especially since we talked about this coming out of Chuck, especially the last show in Portland. Again, like whatever attendance, give or take, but no particular huge groundswell of hundreds of people breaking the door down to get into a knife show. So that transitions us into the show talk. Are there too many shows this year? We've said this before, but it might actually be true. There's a lot of shows out there. So maybe some of these larger shows, mid-sized shows, or maybe just shows so far away. Maybe shows on the West Coast, Nevada, Portland, too far away? What do you guys think?
I don't think they're too far. I still love the USN show. I'm going to go as far as long as it's running. So it's my only reason to go to Vegas. So SHOT Show is 50-50, but USN's a forced show for me. but Portland is just a different thing. It was just far. Like I wanted to go to Portland, but I didn't want to go 2 hours out of Portland, where USN just airport. The only thing is like it is convenient for Labor Day, but as a knife maker, Labor Day, like I don't follow bank holidays, so it doesn't mean like it's a day off. It is for attendees, but it just makes the weekend really expensive. Hotels cost more, plane flight costs more, everything's packed, which is fine, but could affect it for some.
So I mean that's a good point. It's like you would have been going to Vegas anyway. You're an individual who enjoys going to Vegas. So like the show is a nice bumper, but you'd be going to Vegas anyway. Chuck, you stopped going to USN a little while ago. You've been going for a while.
I've actually never been there as an exhibitor. I've only gone as an attendee. And after a while, it wasn't cost effective just to go hang out at a show for a weekend. I think two topics I'd like to touch on are, I think there are too many shows. To basically, maybe we didn't have the crowd at USN because at the end of June or beginning of June, you have Blade Show, the world's largest knife show, huge draw. Then at the end of July, we had the Portland show. So if you do Blade Show, do you have enough time to build knives for USN? I mean, knife makers can only make so many knives. Maybe, it's 2 months away, 3 months away. But in that time, it turns into summer. You have life, you have vacations. Your kids are home from school, so you have less time. And I think people are being more selective of which shows they're going to because it's expensive for them to go. And so this is possibly a result of COVID because you could sit at home and it's like used car shopping. You could look and wait and find the right knife at the right price and the right material combination that you want. And you can do it from the comfort of your home. You don't have to get on a plane. You don't have to stay at a hotel. You don't have to wait in line at a lottery to not win anything and be disappointed.
Okay, so that's interesting. Do you think that this is sort of the COVID / like online shopping social media effect then, where people are like scrolling for things like I can just have anything I want. All I just have to do is buy it. That's also a factor?
Yeah, things are more readily available to everyone. You can buy knives right on your phone. You can be in a lottery on social media on your phone and win from work, from home, on the can, wherever.
Ideally. I mean, okay, well that's an interesting. Okay, that's a good point, which also brings up a tangent to that, which is like, what about in-person lotteries opening up on Facebook and Instagram? Like, is that fair? Like, sometimes I see that and I understand it. I'm like, okay, like, sure, but then at the same time, I'm like, is that fair? Like, everybody here, like, we all traveled here to be part of this. Like, what the heck's the point of that then? Then it's just online anyway. So like, what if somebody on the internet wins it? Like, well, if they wanted to be here, they'd be bidding. Like, I traveled here for this. Like,
well, it's advantageous for makers to open it up to people for online bidding because someone may bid more than they normally would in person because they didn't have to pay to get to the show. So if they want to add an extra $1,000 on top of the high bid that's in person at the show, they can afford to do that.
I rarely see show goers win auctions lately, in a while, actually. I get it. Like, when I would do an auction, I would do it online also because it's an auction piece. Like, I need top dollar for this thing. This thing has an insane amount of hours into it. Now, if it's an auction that's just a pretty basic knife, okay, but if it's a knife that, like, you need top dollar for, has all the materials, has every bell and whistle you could throw at it, every trick you've learned, different story. I've seen lottos too once, like I think once or twice, where it was both online and in person for some of the knives. And I was like, no, like lottos are for the show. I've only seen it once or twice. I think people realize it's not a good idea. But they're like, some of these are for online too. And I'm like, no. But auctions, I get why you would run them both online, and you could do an auction piece just for the show. But again, it just depends.
So I guess that's right. That's logical because really, as someone who almost never gets down at an auction, it doesn't make sense for a dealer to do it. And like, so someone who doesn't do it, but I do get an auction piece is basically like, it's a fuck you piece. It's like, it's everything you've got. It should go for top dollar. And if you're going to do that, why mince around? Just open it up to the internet and have them, who knows who's out there, bid on the piece, because they could definitely. That's where like the money boys get in there, and it's like, okay, like I want that. Like I'm going to outbid everybody. Like, okay, that's logical. Okay, so right, so internet for some of that stuff, but definitely like the availability of pieces, the availability of knives on the internet. I think there is something to that. Like I think when Blade Show came back a year or two ago after the pandemic, it was a super surge. Like there was a lot of people. And then this year at Blade Show, equally like the same thing in Atlanta. There seemed to be a lot of people at Blade Show. And, we were talking about at the show, Nick and I were talking about with people, which is a dicey subject, but like respecting Blade Show. Like you have Blade Show. Okay. A lot of makers are turning away from Blade Show because it's an industry thing. But at the same time, it is an industry thing. Like you've got Blade Show West, you've got regular Blade Show, and you've got Blade Show Texas. I mean, those dates are the dates that seem to be working really well. Chuck, you've done all of those.
I
twice?
do all of them. Yeah, I'm on my second round of doing all of them, and it's the OG of knife shows. It's the biggest. It's promoted the best, and I think it attracts more makers that people want to go see, to talk to try to score a knife from. Makers bring their best knives. For Blade Show Atlanta, they have the Custom Knife Awards, and that's your opportunity to try to beat everybody else in the room. So if you're not there, you may be a great knife maker, but if you can't beat everybody else in the room, how good are you?
That's a pretty solid point. Chuck's basically telling y'all to get at him. So, I mean, okay, I see you.
Bring your A game to Blade
right.
Show.
Okay, that's fair. So Blade Show Atlanta will always serve as like, that's it. Like this is the octagon of knife making. Like, yeah, okay, there's a bunch of weird people selling like cooking pots in there, and like, so we have some Chinese imports in there. Okay, whatever. But like at the end of the day, Blade Show Atlanta will always be just Blade Show to the rest of us, because that's the one. That's the original. That's Blade Show. And I definitely think, so this year is my first Blade West, which I am looking forward to. I've been to Blade, right, yeah, we're going. Blade Texas, I've been a couple times. Great show. Every time for Blade Texas for me, I have a great time. It's a good show, solid lineup, very good customer turnout. And I've heard, you were there, the first Blade West in Salt Lake, same thing. Good attendance.
It was great. Yeah, it was like, the sizes of the show are smaller than Blade Show Atlanta. They're a little less than half. So if Blade Show Atlanta is close to 1,000 tables, I'd say they're between 400 and 500 tables. So you can see the whole thing in one day. And it's more customs. It's less antique and collectible knives, whereas Blade Show Atlanta has everything from productions, customs, antique, collectible. Whereas Blade Show Texas and Blade Show West are more geared towards custom knives and production knives. There's far less antique and collectible knives there as well. So you can also buy materials. All the material suppliers are there.
That's actually reminds me about USN. Like everyone at the end of the show, when they see me around walking, like, did you buy anything? I was like, the only money I spent this week was on Vegas things, gambling, food, and shows. I was like, I didn't buy a single thing at the show because there's no material suppliers. Like, not a single material supplier.
Chad Nichols wasn't even there?
No, there was not a single material supplier.
Wow.
No carbon fiber, nothing.
George wasn't there. There was no tires, Zerk, Alpha. So I didn't see Alpha's booth. They might have been there because I saw Chuck walking around.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think I saw their booth. I could have just missed it. But besides, like, I was looking around for materials. There's nothing like natural materials I like for our shows. USN doesn't usually have natural materials, but sometimes they do. But yeah, I needed carbon fiber, some other stuff, just nothing.
Well, when you make stickers, you don't have to buy your materials at the show. You just buy it by the sheet or the roll.
The lack of materials, that's an interesting, that's important too though. Like, so at a smaller custom knife show, we don't really see material suppliers always. Sometimes we do, but certainly at a larger to mid-size one, we definitely do. Chuck, you made a great point about Blade West and SLC, which is it's like a condensed, boiled down Blade Show. It's just the meat without the potatoes, a little bit of the fat trimmed, and I would agree with that sentiment because you do have material suppliers, you have custom knife makers, and certainly at Blade Texas, it used to be the ice show. So if you're into that thing, the Blade Texas has a very serious forging community that is there. It's part of our community. It's a different part of it. I love those guys. I think it's very interesting to look at. They are outside the tactical realm. But getting back to my original point, I think there is something to respecting in the show circuit. I think there's something to respecting the Blade shows and saying, okay, you're never like 50-50, Sacco, Lone Star Invitational, Maker Syndicate, the Portland show. All of those budgets combined might be the advertising budget of Blade Show. Might be. But Blade Show owns a magazine, which is actually owned by another company. They could set on fire millions of dollars in advertising. Wouldn't mean a thing. Would be a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, ever since the new ownership, they definitely restructured the show. Something I noticed at this past Blade, I don't think I mentioned it when we did the recap. There was people that came by my booth because I had a booth and not a table that didn't even know what a custom knife was. I can remember this one guy came by with his son, and his son was handling the knife, and the guy was like, "Do you like it, son? Like, is that what you want for your birthday?" He was looking for a birthday present for his kid, and I froze, and I was just like, I'm about to have to let this kid, like, break this kid's heart because he likes it, and I'm about to tell his dad this is $1,200. And then we get to that moment where I tell the dad it's $1,200, and his jaw dropped, and like he didn't realize what he was looking at, and that was a custom knife, and it was just a little awkward, like, put that down, son, and like take 10 steps back.
Yeah, right. Do the slow back up.
But I did notice that a lot of he's like, but then I spoke to him before, like, yeah, he was local. So he was just in Atlanta, heard about the show through advertising, and decided to go. And he was not the only guy that I saw that where he's just, I'm in Atlanta, I heard about the show, I'm into knives, like I have a bunch of knives, gas station knives, but knives, and then heard about a custom show. We could go and see that.
I think something to consider with the 3 different Blade shows is the timing of the year of each show. Whereas, so you typically have Blade Show Texas in March, spring. People have done their taxes. People are getting tax returns. It's far enough past the holidays that people don't worry about spending money on Christmas because that's already gone by. You have Blade Show Atlanta, where everyone's gotten out of school. It's the beginning of summer. And Blade Show West is in October. It's before people start thinking about the holidays. People have gone back to school. So if you have college students or high school kids where you had to spend money to get them to college and, furnish their dorm rooms and stuff, you've spent your money on that. And now you're into October and you say, I'm going to go to the knife show and I have some money that I've saved up and I don't have to spend it on my college student. And then I don't have to spend money on Christmas yet because it's, a month and a half away. So I'm not going to think about that. And so timing of shows is one thing. Like if you have a show in the middle of the summer, well, you have a lot of people who are on vacation or take their families on vacation. What's going to make your wife happy? You buying another knife or you taking your kids and her on vacation somewhere?
Ideally, you do both. That's the trick. That's
the
the thinking right now. And you're absolutely right because for some reason I just noticed that the West and Texas, it's perfectly 3 months before and after Christmas. That's pretty smart. Like that puts you in like a 3/4 rotation yearly. So it's 3 months after Christmas, middle of summer, 3 months before Christmas. Like that is a very clever timing, and then the other shows, which is the super custom insular shows, as a 2-part, right. So they're dancing around with dates sort of all over the place. But then also to Nick's point, no one is going to go to those shows who is not completely aware of the price points involved. Or I don't think for the most part. I'm sure maybe 1 or 2 people would stumble in sort of unaware. But even then, the gathering used to have, still I think they were still there, which was, they had Spyderco, and they do have like a couple production companies there, which was always gave that show an air of legitimacy as far as the knife industry as a whole went, which was kind of cool in the Portland show to see them pull in the production companies. So that way, if somebody does just, you're trying to get new people into knife shows. That way, there's a sort of a smooth transition from production to custom. So in a retail stance, I would say I don't want anyone to leave without at least buying some knife. Like, okay, buy a Spyderco. If you don't win a lottery, grab a CRKT, whatever. Buy a Glock. Though I don't think they were selling Glocks. I think they were just representing. But either way, if you don't know what a Glock is for some reason, you have never understood pistols, then you should buy a Glock. That's great. Or buy a Staccato. Staccato was a Blade show. So I think that the show thing, timing, representation, attendance, there's a lot that goes into planning a show. And, hopefully we can get this wrangled. Though we'll see how the rest of this year goes, because right now we're in the heat of it. This is it. I mean, we're in show season. In New England, this is also fair season, but like in the knife world, this is show season. We've got SLC is coming up very quickly. I think 5 weeks, 4 weeks.
Maker Syndicate's this coming weekend, I think.
And the Maker Syndicate is this weekend, which none of us will be there. So we'll have to call somebody that is there, and we'll have to have them on the podcast to give us a report, a news report, to see how the show went. We talked about this. I am very interested to see how that comes out. It seemed very organic in its collective of individuals. I think I could go on the record being cringy and saying that show definitely pulled the hot new makers, or not new, but the hot makers right now. So that's good for them.
Is that the show that's in Indiana?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm interested to see how that goes.
And I think there's there's a knife show in Louisiana this month. There's a knife show coming up in St. Louis, the Twin Cities Knife Show. There's the California Knife Show, or California Custom Show, and then there's Kentucky in December.
Yeah, the CCKS, I think it is. Those dates are awfully close together.
There's Nashville.
And there's Nashville in November.
So we got Maker Syndicate on the 16th and 17th of this month. The Marlboro show is also coming up. For those of you living in the New England area, Blade Show West is. This is where it gets dicey. This is what I'm talking about. October 13th and 14th, we have Blade Show West in Salt Lake City. The following weekend, October 20th through 22nd, is the California Custom Knife Show. The 20th is the Friday Night Blade Affair. I just have it in my calendar as the same thing. And then Nashville is in November with Arts and Metal the Friday before it. So it's 16th is Arts and Metal. Also Formula One. That's right. Formula One's the same weekend. And then Kentucky, December 2nd. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of knife shows going on right now. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. Certainly, it seems to be testing the waters for one common thing. The Portland show and the USN show are completely, I would consider, West Coast shows. I mean, I'm aware that Las Vegas is not literally on the coast, but I would, from my side of the map, that's on the West Coast. And Portland is definitely on the coast. Indiana, however, is very much not on the coast. So that's cool. Kentucky, technically, I mean, sort of, it's on the, I would say that's in the corridor, East Coast corridor. But hopefully the attendance for the Indiana show and the Kentucky show and Nashville are great. I'm looking forward to them. Nashville is usually pretty good. You went to Nashville for the first time last year, but
I've gone 2 years in a row.
Yeah, but exhibiting first time
last year was the first time I exhibited.
Right.
Are
you exhibiting this year?
No, I don't think I'll be in Nashville.
Okay.
My next show's SLC. I think I'm just gonna be doing the Blade shows from now on in Kentucky, just because I don't want to lose my spot in Kentucky. It's really hard to get a spot there. It's essentially playing a lotto. So just run it and just keep doing it. It's always a good attendance. So,
Chuck, that's basically the same thing for you then.
Yes.
Blade show and Kentucky.
I did Portland this year.
Oh, Portland, yeah.
So yeah, I'm working on knives for my 5th show of the year.
That's a heavy show circuit. That's not a joke. That's like.
And then I'm doing Kentucky, so I will have done 6 shows this year.
Is that the most amount of shows you have done?
1 year, this is a long time ago, pre-COVID, I did 9 shows in 1 year.
I think 2019 he did a bunch when we all did a bunch.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think when we did, every show in 2018 or 2019, we did every show.
I did 13 shows in 2019. I wanted to die by the end of that year.
That was great though.
No,
we
that
did
was
the whole thing.
As a maker, that was not great. Every 2 weeks was just like, go, don't sleep, show. Sleep for a night or two. Okay, we got 2 weeks then. October, November, and then December almost killed me. That was just straight every 2 weeks I was on the flight. That was horrible. Never doing that again.
We'll probably do it again at some point.
No, one of them wasn't even a flight. I did California, and then I
just
drove 24 hours with you from California to Oregon, then
Yeah.
did Blade West.
Yeah.
You
Me and Elijah rented a car in Anaheim and drove to Portland for the other show.
I was going to fly back to New York for 4 days and fly back west. I don't know why the hell I did both shows, but yeah.
Just because, fuck it.
Just made product for both shows, set it aside, drove cross country technically on the West Coast to another show.
Cloud chasing.
That was fun, but yeah, I'm never doing that again.
So I mean, the Blade shows, those are serious shows. Not that the rest of them aren't, but those are still serious shows. At least for this crowd. And then Kentucky, I'll probably go to Kentucky this year. I go to Kentucky just because it's fun. Like I just have good memories of drinking with you guys there. So you know,
It's not as much of a knife show anymore. Now it's a get together. It's a social event with knives. Because there's more bourbon than I've ever seen in my entire life there that people bring in to share and show off and go on bourbon tours, visit distilleries. There's a lot to do.
did the craft brew junkies show up last year?
Yes.
They did.
They always do.
Okay.
You just think there used to be more because, 2 years ago, 2019, you stayed in my room. And I stayed with Josh, and there was like 20 craft brew junkies people in the room.
Yeah, I just remember coming back to the room, and I was like, "Oh, well, okay, I guess we're still drinking.
There was a get together in
we're
our
drinking
room.
a shit
That's why I
ton
was
of
like,
beer." And then someone was like, "Have you ever drinking like a $200 bottle of beer?" And I was like, "No." Like, here, just have it. And I was like,
No, it was an
"Fair enough."
$800 bottle of what I said was soy sauce, and the guy looked really disrespected. And I was just like, "I'm sorry," and the other guy's like,
about that.
"Yeah, no, it does taste like soy sauce." I was like,
It was some kind of,
I don't know, but
IPA.
I couldn't drink it.
yeah. All right, yeah.
Well,
so
let's talk about Kentucky because
Yeah, let's
Kentucky
dive
is one
into
of
it.
these small 4-hour shows.
Right.
That's limited number of makers, limited number of attendees, and it's kind of been, well, it's borrowed some of its model from TKI and Friday Night Blade Affair, where basically you have a small window of time. You have some of the hottest makers there are out there, and those are the makers that draw everyone to the show. So I think that people being selective of shows, they are going to go to shows where they have the best chance of winning the best knife that they can get. So instead of going to larger shows, they're going to go to these smaller shows that even if you don't win a knife from your favorite maker, your next favorite maker, you might be able to win a lotto. You just have more of a chance. Essentially.
That's fair. Also, right, so smaller show, smaller attendance, less competition as a collector. You have less people there who are probably interested in the same knife maker that you are. And I think as far as lineage goes, you're absolutely right. I'm sure that somebody will probably not correct me, but I would say that absolutely TKI, the OG 50/50 TKI in Las Vegas, people say it was stressful. I went a bunch of times. I thought it was kind of fun, but like I like that kind of environment where everyone's like screaming and hitting each other. Like it's sort of enjoyable for knives. I don't know. But then that into Friday Night Blade Affair, right? Friday Night Blade Affair definitely took a bite out of TKI. And I would say definitely, you correct me if I'm wrong, because you guys were there in the beginning. Kentucky was the first one to do the thing that everyone else is trying to copy now. Is that fair? Like Portland is trying to bite a style of that. The Maker Syndicate's trying to bite a style of that. Like the small sort of like local trunk show. I mean, okay, obviously like Mystic might be like that.
I
Maybe,
think
but like,
TKI was the first.
yeah, but as far as lineage goes.
But
is that,
TKI started in Chicago and was started by Ed Wormser.
there you go. Say.
So at the beginning of the Chicago Custom Knife Show on Friday night, he would have the Tactical Knife Invitational and then do the Chicago Custom Knife Show. And this is back in like 2004, 2005. And then TKI was sold to Steve Delac, and now Sacco owns TKI.
There's not even a TKI. No, they do TKI in California now. You know, as an aside, Remind me, though no one ever wants to really do that, remind me to dedicate an episode to Wormser. It's a necessary thing that a lot of people don't know about him, and I talk to a lot of people, and they always have interesting stories, and I think that would be an important knife history thing in the future, / maybe just interview Steve. If we can get him on here, that'd be cool.
He's part of the Loveless documentary that they did about Bob Loveless, so you can get a glimpse into who Ed Wormser was by watching that.
Many stories from Barry also of Wormser. Also need to get Barry on here. He owes me. But yes, as far as the shows go, I would say that Kentucky is definitely is that incorrect? That Kentucky is the one that everyone's kind of be stylized after?
I don't see how it's a TKI thing, just because TKI thing was meant to be very high-end feeling. The tickets were $400. There was high-end food at one point and open bar. Like, it felt like it was invitational. You were invited. Kentucky's not right now. You on table, it's lotto. People came dressed to the nines. People came in suits and gowns and dresses to TKI when it was still in Vegas.
Those were the days. Yeah.
It was a different thing. Like, you felt like you were at a gala and not a knife show.
Right.
Where Kentucky's not that. It's the epitome of a trunk show that
It's the
evolved.
complete opposite.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's literally a trunk show that evolved. It was started in a
Right.
Mexican restaurant. I didn't do those years. I think it was 4 years of that, or 5 even. I did the first year at the hotel, which there was not many people. There was no dealers, and they didn't know what they were doing yet because it was the first year. Like, me and Chuck were in the other room. It was dark. There was no lights. It was an L thing with a lot of empty space with dining tables around and chairs. And then year 2, it was a whole different thing. They redid the layout. They got the lights going, whether they paid for extra or the hotel just got more lights. Dealers were showing up. This time, the actual whole entire hotel was booked out for our industry. There wasn't a mix of people where it got weird in the halls because everyone was just drunk at 2 a.m. in the halls. Now they don't care what we do because it's pretty much our shows, almost the entire hotel. But yeah, you can't compare those two shows.
Right. So going back to my previous question, though, is Kentucky the one that everyone's trying to be now?
For like the small micro shows, I think so.
Okay.
They sell out every time. There's always a wait list. People ask me all the time if I get them a ticket. That's when I start realizing, I guess the tickets do sell out for attendees. Because people like, I wish I was, like, I'll talk to people like 6 months down. I'm like, oh yeah, I was trying to go, but I couldn't get a ticket. And I was like, I never realized it was that hard to get a ticket. Because, like, they give us, like, 2 weeks for us to book our hotel rooms and everything. So, knife makers are covered. But then, yeah, when I talk to people, like, yeah, I couldn't get a room there. I couldn't even get a ticket to the show. I've heard guys that just went to the show and stayed there, so they could hang out, even if they couldn't go to the show, and hope they could get in if they're just there.
Spicy.
So
hard to get into. So it seems like there's a place for these, like, smaller trunk shows. There's definitely a place for Blade Show. There's a place for all these shows. There's a lot of them now, and I think we're hitting an apex. I think we're definitely maybe on the other side of a bubble. I think we were definitely in a bubble for a minute. I think we're definitely coming on the other side of that, and I think it'll be interesting to see where the shows end up in this quarter or going into the quarter 4 of this year, for sure.
I think next year we're going to continue to see more of these boutique or trunk shows, because from a maker standpoint, it's great because it's one day, it's quick and easy. You get all the benefits of the knife show. You get to see your customers. You get to see other great knives. You get to make your money, and you can go home.
That is
the next
easy.
day.
Yeah.
You don't have to, if you sell out and have a lottery on Friday, you don't have to spend the whole day Saturday walking around the show waiting to go home.
Yeah, honestly, the one-day show, it's convenient for everybody too, because then, like, the flying and the traveling, it's a 3-day event. Travel in, stay overnight, and then show, and then travel out. You can do a Friday to Sunday thing, and for most people, that's not too crazy.
This past February, the New York Custom Knife Show was one day, and it was held on a Saturday. So people didn't have the ability to say, I'll be back tomorrow.
There's a sales tactic there.
You had to buy it now, or if you come back in an hour, it may not be there.
Not only like the small shows are good, and they should be. The problem is they're still biased to the West Coast, or now they're moving towards like what I just call Middle America. It's anything that's not on the coasts. But we don't really have them on the East Coast. The benefit of them is usually they're easier to plan, associate for. So you get them closer to hotels. I mean, closer to airlines, and depending on these certain states, they're really cheap to fly to. Like, for example, my friends always think I'm nuts. Like, there was a point where me and you were in Vegas 3 times a year for a couple of years there. My friends were always like, and then California a month later, and they're like, why do you keep flying to 6 hours just to spend 3 days somewhere? Like, because I've been saying I like the pain of flying constantly for 3 days and spending a total of like 20 hours at the airport just for 3 days. That's the thing. You have an East Coast show. It's some people. It's like I could do a 1 2 hour flight or like a 4 or 5 hour drive for a weekend trip. Because even then, like 4 or 5 hour drive is 4 or 5 hours. You're done. 4 or 5 hour air flight is still an extra 4 hours of hassle dealing with airport stuff. So it's still a 6 hour flight. It's really a whole day. Get there early, getting out of there, setting up hotel, like that whole thing.
I'd commit a whole day for travel on either end. That's easy.
If you're going to the West Coast. When you're going to the East Coast, it's not that bad.
Right. Actually, we've driven down to Kentucky on multiple occasions.
Yeah, I don't think 14 hours. That's enough to fly. But even then, when I fly there, it's an easy flight.
Yeah, I think we'll probably drive this year. It's a little more logical.
That was 14 from New York. We're now go there. It's probably gonna be like 18, like Blade.
Chuck, you're flying, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'd rather be there in 3 hours.
Than 14 hours.
Relax, go to the happy hour at the hotel, and enjoy a cocktail while you guys are still fighting traffic.
We did it a couple times. It was an experience. We took a road trip. We already did that in another episode. Looking forward to this. Looking forward to the show season. We're headed to Blade West pretty soon. We've got a few more episodes between now and then with some guests. So that's to look forward to. And otherwise, I think we'll probably keep doing this in person a couple of times because it works out really well. It's much nicer doing this around a table insteed of over mics far away. It has a little more better of a flow. Hopefully,
make faces and laugh at each other silently.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Flick people off across the table. Hopefully, it sounds better out there in podcast land as we flow through this. Thanks for sticking with us, the old Bladeology. That's all I've got for this episode, gentlemen. Anything else?
That's about it.
All right. Well, this is Jeremiah Burbank. I'm signing off.
Nick Chuprin of NCC Knives signing off.
Chuck Gudritis of Gudritis Knives signing off.
To find out more about myself, Jeremiah Burbank, you can email me about the podcast at bladeologypodcast@gmail.com or my work email info@pvk.com, or you can check out the website www.pvk.com. To find out more about my co-host, Nick Chuprin, you can find him on Instagram at NCC Knives or on his website, www.nccknives.com. You can also shoot him an email, contact@nccknives.com. Chuck Gudritis can be found on Instagram at Gudritis Knives, which is GEDRAITIS. You can also find Chuck on Facebook with his Facebook group, Chuck Gudritis Handcrafted Knives, or shoot him an email at gudritisKnives@yahoo.com.